First of all, I don't know how many of you saw or even read the email I sent out this morning about home affordability.
Just read
And I'll make sure you're on the list, okay?
I get that one on Friday, but I haven't got the one.
Okay, it's two different lists. So if you didn't get the one this morning, remind me and I'll put you on that list so that you'll start getting them. I send them out maybe once a week. It's just a kind of a news little thing about what's going on. But this morning I sent out something about home affordability. And the whole idea of that message is one, to inform you, but the other idea behind that one is to give you some video content, something that you can share with people so that you can bullet point it, whether you put it into a longer message or break it up into a reel, however you want to do it. In fact, I'm going to personally do a reel today, actually two of them, with regard to that subject. Because I think home affordability right now, people don't understand what that means. So when you see the email, you'll understand. If you read it, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Home affordability's gone way down. And bless you. And it's at one of its lowest points for many years. But the good news is, my wife always says, my rose-colored glasses, which I put in the note, is that it's not always going to be like that. And when interest rates come down, home affordability is going to increase, people's wages are going to increase, and home affordability will be back at what we call the 100-point mark, which is where we need it to be. So, but I want to share something else this morning. Some of you have seen this before. This is not new. I've probably done this over the last year, maybe 3-4 times. But I think right now it's critical that we take a look at this again, because people miss this. Every once in a while, you and I will talk to a buyer who gets it. But most people don't get this little process right here. And they're missing on an opportunity. Now, this assumes they can afford the new mortgage that they're going to apply for. It makes that assumption. Now, bear in mind, not everybody can afford to buy a house right now. Steffi and I were talking about that just before Huddle. I mean, right now, it's tough. There are some people who just plain can't afford because they don't make enough money. You and I were chatting about it this morning. People they're not making enough money to be able to afford the house they want to get. So I get that. All right? But there are more people that can afford it, but are leery about spending the money for it. And this is the part I think they miss. So let's take a look at this. I just did a $500,000 home. Now that's above the median price, but the numbers make it easy to multiply. So I did a 10% down, that means they're going to get a loan for $450,000. With me so far? All right. Gosh, can you believe I'm saying this? At an 8% interest rate. Ooh, that's painful. All right. That means that the principal and interest payment, don't worry about taxes and PMI and all that junk, because that you got to pay no matter what anyway. But that gives them a monthly payment of $3,280. Principal and interest only. All right. Now, I also did this and said, what if the $450,000 note were at 5 3/4? Substantially less, 2 1/4 less. That makes the monthly payment $2,338, right? So now I subtract that number from this one, and they're paying $942 a month more than if the rate were 5 3/4%. So on the surface, thank you, Claire. That's a lot of money. I can't afford to do that. It's not that you can't afford it, you choose not to. Again, making the assumption that the people can't afford it. They choose not to. Why? Because it's $942 higher than what they'd like to be spending. I get that. What's that?
Appreciation.
Well, that's what we're going to go on that side of the chart for in just a minute. Now, I'm being ultra conservative. I'm kind of taking a stance like Mike talked about a few weeks ago, where just maybe, what if interest rates stayed up for 2 years rather than 1 year? I still think they'll come down next year, but what if they stayed up there for 2 years? So I took the $942, multiplied it times 24. So for 24 months, this couple, or this whoever, they're going to look at this and they're going to pay $22,608 more than what they are comfortable spending. Because when they started talking to you as their real estate agent, they said, I want to buy a $500,000 home and I want my principal and interest payment to be somewhere around $2,350. In reality, today, it's going to be almost $3,300. So now they're seeing a $950 increase and they're saying, as Claire said, ouch, no, I don't want to do it. So I never want to convince somebody to do something they don't want to do. But I do like presenting to people the economics of what they can, or what might happen. So let's take a look. They buy the $500,000 home today. I do think it's reasonable to assume a 5% increase in housing over the next 12 months. I'm not putting in 8 or 10. I'm not going down as low as 2 or 3. I do think a 5%, even with interest rates this high, I do think, well, we've been seeing over 5%. So at least 5%. That means that in 1 year, this house is going to be worth $525,000 in 1 year. The next year, it's going to grow another 5%, assuming that the 5% number holds up. Now that house is going to be worth $551,250, which means, what Kara was saying, the appreciation. So I take the $551,250 minus what they paid. That gives them $51,250 of equity gain, or as I like to call it, wealth building. So I now subtract the $22,608. Kara, go ahead.
Sorry, how come you don't do the $450?
That's the loan amount.
Wait, but then they still have that extra $50 in equity.
Yes, they still have that $50,000. That's correct. That's part of their equity. I'm only showing equity gain.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm just showing equity gain.
That's off the appraised value.
Yes.
Sorry, maybe I'm backtracking. So I see where it says 8%, but then I see the 8.5% where you're saying it's 2,338 less. But
Oh, no. This is at. So this is 450 at 5.75%.
oh, that's the difference. So after this, can you tell us what the cost would be for some of these buy downs too, possibly?
For somebody what?
Is that like a buy down?
No. This is 2 years down the road.
Oh,
They refinance
okay.
2 years down the road.
Okay.
Good question. So the way that I look at it, they had $51,250 of equity gain or wealth building over the last 24 months. I subtract what they paid extra, $22,608. That means I subtracted from there. That means that their actual equity gain or wealth building was $28,542. Now, I had a client on Friday. This guy is a numbers guy. And he said to me, well, Greg, what's my return on investment? And I said, what would you estimate it to be? And the numbers were a little different. He was looking at about a $350,000 home, but basically the same analysis. And I said, well, it's relatively simple. You invested $50,000 to Kara's point. I invested $50,000. My gain is $28,642. So I invest $50,000, and 2 years later, somebody gives me $28,642. Now, let me ask you this. How many of us in this room, if I said to you, you give me $50,000 right now, And in 2 years, I'm going to turn that 50,000 into 78,000 for you. What would you do? You'd be writing me the check, right? And that is the point. So from a financial perspective, even with an obnoxious interest rate at 8%, it still makes sense to buy a house today as long as you think, you feel, and you believe that the house price is going to go up by about 5% per year. Now, if you think the housing prices are going to go down, then you got a different problem. Or if you think they're only going to go up at 2 or 3%. But what if it didn't go up at 5? What if it goes up at 7? And mind you, when those interest rates get down below 6 again, home prices are not going to be 5% higher. Home prices are going to be 8 or 10% higher. Yes?
This is all only assuming you refinance in 2 years, though.
Yes, that assumes you're going to refinance in 2 years. And there is no reason why you would not refinance in 2 years unless you just blew your credit. Now, your refinance cost on this here, let's just assume your refinance cost is $4,000. So subtract 642, subtract 4,000, so you still make $25,000. Jeff?
Is it possible to build a Excel spreadsheet with different scenarios that we can plug in when we sit down with somebody and talk to somebody about the different scenarios?
I am absolutely certain it's possible. I don't think I'm the guy to be able to write that.
Do you know anybody that can?
If I can get my son to, he's an Excel guru. I don't know if he's got time. He's in the middle of his MBA program at Georgia Tech, so I'm not sure if he's got time, but I can ask him if he can do it.
Because I would just think if you could build it in where you put in the different percentages.
Right, and then just,
And then put in the different,
and it would show the numbers.
Yeah, you could.
I'll check with it. Good question.
Multiple scenarios.
I'll
and that
check
way
with-
When you're sitting down with somebody
Yeah.
to talk to them, you could just go,
Yeah.
this is what could happen and this
Yeah.
is what you're making.
Let me see what I can come up with, okay? I'll ask, my son's name is Jordan. I'll just ask him if he can do that. I know I'm not capable of doing that to make it work. I know enough about Excel to be dangerous, but that's the extent. So, now, are you comfortable with the way I did this? Shoot holes in it. What piece of this do you think is not accurate? Or makes you uncomfortable? What's that?
The cost to refinance, that has to come out of it too.
I just said $4,000. So if I take the 28,642 and subtract 4,000, roughly 25,000. Yes, that's true. You got to take the cost of refinance out of it, which would be about $4,000. And it might not even be that much. Depends where the rates come in at. So, I mean, if this were my customer, we wouldn't have waited for the 5 3/4. We would have refinanced before that. But I'm just trying to show, what if it lasted that long and they were in that? We would have refinanced before that.
Why?
It's still
At what
worth it
rate
after
would
a
you
point and a
refinance?
half.
I'm sorry?
At what rate would you refinance?
On this loan here, probably would have encouraged them to think about it at
6.5?
probably right at about 6.5.
Depending on how long they plan on staying.
Yeah, right. Depending what their goal is, what their target is. And then we would do it again. I mean, back in 2020 and 2021, all my customers that I did from all these years before that had these interest rates that were higher,
Yeah.
I mean, we refinanced them at 3 3/4 when the rates went below 4. Then we refinanced them again when the rates went below 3.
How often can a homeowner refinance?
As many times as they want.
Even within like the same year?
Well, the answer to that is yes and no.
Okay.
Okay, so the question, thank you, Miguel. If you're FHA or if you're VA, you can't do it for 6 months, okay? Conventional, there's no rule, but there is an unwritten rule. And I'll share this with you because this is how lenders operate. Oh, yes, they can keep that on there. The thing is, because I'm transparent with everybody. The reason lenders do not want you to pay off your loan in less than until after you've made 6 payments is that if you haven't made 6 payments and you pay off the loan, regardless of how you pay it off, the lender, the loan officer, and the company have got to pay back all the money that they earned on that loan. So how would you like if you went and sold somebody a house and they sold it within some period of time, 4, 5, 6 months, and the rule was with your brokerage that you had to give back all of your commission? How would that make you feel? What's the probability of you selling somebody that house? Probably not going to sell it to them. In my case, I just am very transparent with people. I just ask them, would you mind making 6 payments before you pay it off? Because I have a lot of clients who are buying homes and they don't have to sell their current one, but they're going to sell the current one right after they move into this one. And in most cases, it's not going to require 6 payments. So I just ask them, would you mind making 6 payments and then paying it off? 100% of my clients, absolutely, Greg, we don't want you to not make any money. People are amazingly reasonable.
That's your bare minimum?
What's that?
Is it a standard 6 months?
It's pretty much standard, 6 payments. I'm careful, not 6 months, 6 payments. All right? There might be a lender or two that says 4 payments, but most of the time it's 6. Now, FHA and conventional, it doesn't make any difference. It's in order to refinance, it's got to be 6 months. But even that, or 6 payments, even that says that you could do it maybe once every 15 months, make 6 payments and refinance it. And FHA and VA, you can do what they call streamline refinances, which make it real fast, real easy, real simple. Yes?
Sorry,
No, you're,
pissing everybody off. Okay, so let's assume they're making regular payments. I've had clients ask about making an additional payment, so let's say after 6 months, or whatever.
Yeah.
They put their bonus into it. What is your recommendation on making 1 extra payment or 2 extra payments a year? Like, what is ideal for them to overcome that?
that is a fabulous question. And I get that question a lot. What's the feeling? And I usually ask people, have you spoke to your financial advisor? Because there's no straight answer to it. Now, if you make 1 extra payment a year, you'll pay off your loan in 22 and a half years versus 30 years. But here's the interesting thing. How many people are in their homes 22 and a half years? Not many. If you're 30 years old or 35 years old and you're not going to be in this home for 22 years, what difference does it make? If you're 50 years old and you're thinking you may be buying your last home, or 60 years old buying your last home, and you're thinking, I'd like to get this thing paid off because I hope to be retired at some point in time, well, then the answer's different. Then, of course.
What about reducing their payment
Their-
without refinancing?
Okay, that's called recasting, sometimes referred to as reamortization. So I've got a $450,000 mortgage. I've just sold my house. I now want to pay down this mortgage because I want to lower that $3,280 to a more reasonable number, even though the interest rate's obnoxiously high. Now, you can do that. Again, you've got to make 6 house payments before you can do it. You can't do it on FHA, cannot do it on VA, can only do it on conventional. But you can recast. So the borrower is they took $450,000 was their loan. Now they're going to put down an extra $250,000. Now they're going to go down to a $200,000 mortgage. Rather than just send a check, you cannot just send a check to your mortgage company. You have to actually apply for something called recasting. If you are my customer, you don't have to do that. All you gotta do is call me. I'm gonna walk you through the process. I'll be on the phone with you if necessary with your mortgage servicer, and we'll set up the recasting for you. It takes about 60 days and it'll cost you about $350. But all you're gonna do is you're gonna send them, you're gonna fill out a form, then you're gonna wire the money for $250,000. They're going to recalculate what you owe. It's going to be based not on 450, it's going to be based on 200. It's not going to be based on 360 months, it's going to be based on the remaining months of the loan, whatever that is. Let's call it 350. Obviously, your payment is going to drop drastically in that example. And there are a lot of people doing that. Yes? No, that's okay.
Sorry.
We're going to, yeah, I've got one more.
What if somebody has an investment property and they want to take that money and 1031 exchange it? Can you 1031 exchange it into your home to do a
No,
reclass?
no. 1031 exchange got to go to another investment property. All right? Does this help? There's so much behind it. I mean, other questions. Yes, Carol, last question.
How quickly does the recash show up on your credit report? Let's say you were trying to change your DTI for another purchase.
Say that one more time,
How
Carol.
quickly does the recash show up on your credit report?
A recast?
So,
A recast does not, because they're not pulling new credit.
I'm sorry.
A refinance.
The monthly amount that you're paying, how quickly does that show up? That's what I'm asking.
Oh, how much, the new monthly payment. It'll show up after they've accepted it and they've reduced your payment, the next month it'll show up. That's not going to have much of an impact on your mortgage, though. On your credit score.
Maybe just DTI, that's what I was just curious. Like if you were close to,
I'm not sure I follow what I know the DTI is going to come way down, but how does it matter?
So, I'm sorry, I skipped a couple steps in my head. What I was asking is if you were close to the max to buy something else and you were looking for a creative way to lower your DTI so that you could, that's why I was asking.
I'm not sure I'm getting, you might want to stop by after, see if I can figure it out. I'll try to get it for you, though. Anything else, anybody? All right, be sure to check the email. If you don't have my email, let me know, the one from this morning, and I'll make sure you're on the list. And let's see if we can get some people to move on houses. Thanks.